quick thing. So there we go. So we are going to talk about funding tonight, school funding. And before we get into that, just a reminder to everybody, these are being recorded. You can always go back and listen to them afterwards if you don't get the first time around. Sorry, Brinley wants to be part of this so bad. If you don't get it the first time around, you can always go back and listen. We did have some interesting news come out today, as everyone heard, about the guidelines or guidance or 56 pages of shoulds came out today. Lisa already printed it, very nice. We will have another Tuttle Talk tomorrow on Wednesday at 6:30 just to talk about this, because there's a lot we can talk about. I will tell you that I did probably 4 interviews right after it came out. MUR, the In-Depth, the Concord Monitor, and I forget the other one. There was another one in there. And basically NHPR, yes, thank you. And then I'll be on the Exchange on Monday talking about this too. If anyone listens to the Exchange, I'll be on there Monday from 9 to 10. The biggest thing we're getting out of this is there were too many shoulds, right? We know that this is New Hampshire. We know it's local control, but there were some things that don't have to be a should. Something like the HVAC systems, that should be a mandate, that those are being upgraded, that those are being brought up to code. The air quality for our students, for our educators, is not a should, it's a has to. And so that's one thing, we've been talking since May and June about the safety going back into the classroom. And what I'm still hearing, I know Concord, I got an email from the superintendent today saying that I wouldn't know the plan for my kids, my literal kids, my 3, until August 3rd. And as an educator, I can read the plan and decide if I want them to go. And could I homeschool them? Yeah. Would I do an okay job? I think so. But the rest of Concord, who's to say August 3rd is going to be soon enough or not soon enough for the plans to come out? That's too late. This guidance that came out today is simply too late. So we will talk more about it tomorrow. Please put in the chat box any questions you might have so that we can prepare those for tomorrow, and we'll get set on that. So tonight we do have a guest speaker with us. You guys know I love to get guest speakers with us. And hold on one second. I'm sorry, let me just pull this up. So tonight we do have a wonderful guest speaker with us. We have Representative Luno. And what we're gonna do is I am going to, he is the chairman of the, commission funding, I'm gonna get the name wrong.
Commission to Study School Funding. Yep.
There we go, the Commission to Study School Funding. And so he's chairing that for us. And this was something that we asked for last year. This came up in the legislature. And so it's been in the making. It is a great opportunity, I guess you could say, for us to relook at funding. We know that funding in New Hampshire is horrible, right? School funding in New Hampshire, it's really not adequate, even the adequate money that we get. And I will stop her in a second. But we know that it's not what it should be. And so this commission is put together and they're doing some great work. So Representative Luno is a great friend to NEA New Hampshire. He truly is, to the educators, to us. He's in his 3rd term in the New Hampshire House, where you actually are the vice chair of the House Education Committee. So I got to see you a lot in the past 2 years. And you also served on advisory boards in UNH, in Manchester, at the Tech here in Concord, and you did chair the Hopkinton School Board, but you took some time off from that, right? A little bit.
Well, 12 years on the Hopkinton board, I think that's enough.
So needless to say, Representative Luno knows a ton about education. This is somebody who understands the intricacies from lots and lots of different perspectives. I don't have to tell you how important school funding is to New Hampshire, but we finally got a bump last year in the legislature for school funding. This commission is really looking long-term on how we can help to solve this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Representative Luno. You do have an amazing task ahead of you. Chairing this committee cannot be anything that's easy. For one, this is like a Herculean task. I can't even imagine what you're trying to do. And so I'm going to let you talk about the commission. I will bribe my dog to be quiet. And then what I'll do is I'll kind of monitor the chat box as we go through. And after you kind of go through what the commission is and what you guys are doing, we'll come back for some questions and answers.
Sounds good.
And we'll just go from there. So it's all you.
Sounds good, Megan. Thanks very much, and thanks everybody for tuning in this evening. And Megan, what's your dog's name's Bridley?
Brinley.
Brinley.
Yeah,
So,
she's a French bulldog that thinks she's a German Shepherd.
Oh, a Frenchie. So so I'm surprised that she hasn't set off Aussie here. And I think everybody else is muted, but I could imagine if they unmuted, everybody's dogs would be barking right now.
There actually is someone, Lisa, right? Your dog usually jumps up and makes an appearance during the Tuttle talk. So we're definitely dog friendly. It just seems mine's the only one that won't stop barking.
Oh, they're great dogs. So, so anyway, Megan, thanks so much for inviting me tonight, and I'm happy to talk with you guys about what the School Funding Commission is all about, and then take some questions on that. But basically, when this idea about well, it was over a year ago. It was really proposed by Mel Myler, and he was the prime on a bill called House Bill 551, which basically said, look, we really need to take an in-depth study, independent of legislative constraints, independent of preconceived ideas, independent of, well, the state only generates so much revenue, so we can't spend any more than that. Independent of all those things, to really take a look at what we're doing in New Hampshire, take a look at what the needs of school districts are across the state, take a look at what other states have done, and put together, consider a series of solutions or options that we could move forward as bills in next year, in 2021. And so we sort of figured back when we were getting this started last fall into December, that this would be the most important thing that the state's working on right now. And I still think it's a pretty important thing that the state's working on, but pandemic and COVID is just, those are issues 1 through 999 for everybody right now. And but I certainly believe that as the campaign season heats up, that school funding is going to become the #1 issue, as it has been, at least over the last 3 campaign cycles that I've been knocking on doors. When I go around, people say, what are you doing about property taxes? What are you doing about school funding? The only 2 questions people really care most about. And I think we'll be heading back to that very soon. So I appreciate the time this afternoon or this evening to talk about it. So one of the things Megan mentioned was how the Funding Commission really was part of a 3-stage plan that we put together, that the legislature put together last year, and it all. The first stage was to fully restore stabilization grants in fiscal year 20. So the school year that we're finishing up right now, or that we have finished up, and that was absolutely critical for the most vulnerable districts. So thinking of Berlin and Pittsfield and Newport and Claremont and Derry, and they all sent school board members. The mayor of Berlin must have worn through a set of tires getting down to the House Education hearings and testifying, and talked about how the whittling away of stabilization for Berlin not only has devastated its schools, but it's devastated the entire community. So we realized that's something where we can hit the gas hard in the very first year of a budget, and at least bring back something to the most vulnerable districts. So that was the first year of the budget. The second year of the budget, the school year that we're entering right now, we introduced another chunk of cash. About I think the whole package was about $140 million, but I think about 70 million or 60 million of that was in the form of fiscal disparity aid. So this is something that probably a lot of you have heard talked about through the School Funding Fairness Project. Has really brought this issue to light, and it's really where there's the capacity that we have across the state for funding schools differs widely. I mean, if you live in Portsmouth, you live in Newcastle, you're paying a much smaller amount for your schools in property tax rates than if you live in Berlin or Newport, and but even places like Derry are and that was not one that I think was on most people's radar screens, that because they have a very low property valuation per pupil, they have a very high tax rate associated with that, and that makes it hard to for these districts to be providing the same opportunities that a lot of other districts are providing across the state. So it's that equity in educational opportunity that we really have to find a problem on how to solve that. So that goes into the third piece, which is the School Funding Commission. So all these three pieces were part of this last biennial state budget, and the governor signed it. So you know, I know he made a couple of tweaks in terms of what he called, you know, one-time funds and stuff like that, but that's a little bit of sort of wordsmithing, because everything in a state budget is one-time funds, because, you know, one state budget doesn't drive the next state budget. So but we understand how important this you know, this additional money that was brought in has meant, but it's still far from adequate. So that's what the School Funding Commission's doing. The commission is composed of 16 members. 6 are legislative members, 4 from the House, 2 from the Senate, and 10 are members of the public. And I think probably if you looked at the roster, you'd recognize all the names on that. I don't think we're stacked heavy with administrators or with teachers or with any one you know, group, but I think we're bringing together a lot of people with a lot of different knowledge to bear, so that we can hear from people that are experts, not just here in New Hampshire, but subject matter experts nationally, and help us understand how we can put together solutions and consider solutions for this. So has any, and I know there's, at least on my laptop, there's 3 screens here, so I can't really see everybody, but have people attended you know, the School Funding Commission meetings? I know Brian's on there sometimes, Megan's on there, but they're open to the public, and we typically meet Mondays at 2 o'clock. And we did get started back in January, and we're meeting at the Legislative Office building at the State House complex. Did that until about middle of March, and then the plug, like everything else, got pulled on in-person stuff, and we resumed via Zoom meetings back in, I think it was late April, early May, something like that. Once we sort of had thrashed out the tech on that. The meetings are open to the public. They're noticed in the legislative calendars. Megan and Brian, obviously, and George have all these things. And we also have the commission has a website that contains all of our calendar information, as well as a wealth of information. And if I have screen sharing, I can probably share that at some point, because I'd like to show you at least the resources that are available to that. So Mondays 2 o'clock. Please tune in if you can. We take public comment at all of our meetings, and we have certain meetings that are just dedicated to public comment. So I want to just read a little bit from the commission's charge to so you can sort of see what we're told to do essentially by law. Review the education funding formula and make recommendations to assure a uniform and equitable design for financing the cost of an adequate education for all public school students, pre-K through grade 12 in the state. So that's a pretty broad charge there. Identify trends and disparities across the state in student performance in pre-kindergarten through grade 12 based on current school funding options. So where are we lacking? Where are we falling short? And reestablish the baseline for cost, program, staffing, and facilities needed to provide the opportunity for an adequate education. Because we know the adequacy funding formula right now is certainly, I mean, what is it, a $4,000 base against an average statewide cost of close to $20,000 per student. So we know it's not even close to adequate. And some of you may be from some of the districts that were asked to cut down everything you do to just what is paid for by the cost of an adequate education. And there's nothing left. I mean, there's really nothing left. And so that's the commission's charge. We expect to deliver a final report to policymakers, so the governor, the Senate, and the House, right around December 1st of this year. And I don't know what's going to be in that final report, because that's why we're studying this, and we're not going into it with preconceived notions. But I think it's important, and I think the commission feels that it's important that the report be useful to all policymakers. So, because all of them have a hand in the budget process. The governor starts it, and then it goes to the House, and it goes to the Senate. And I certainly have my own personal thoughts on who I'd like to see in the corner office next year, but nothing's a guarantee on this. But what is guaranteed is that we're going to be educating students for a long time to come, and it's important that we fund it properly so that students have equitable access to an opportunity for comparable educational outcomes across the state, whether you live in Berlin or Hopkinton or Concord or Hanover or Derry. Your opportunities to do well and succeed is comparable, and that we have another equity in this too, tax equity, so that you don't have don't have a homeowner in Newcastle paying $5 per thousand on a $2 million home, and a homeowner in Berlin paying $50 per thousand on a $200,000 home, because that's the same dollars. It's not proportional. I mean, and it's just not fair. So having a funding policy that establishes equitable access to education and equitable funding or equitable taxation to fund that education is inherent in this. And a lot of the work that the Commission's been doing since its beginning in January is really trying to understand what all of that means. And despite having 12 years on the Hopkinton School Board and chairing it for 8 years, I have learned so much going through this process. And Brian and Megan, I hope you guys have learned some new things going through.
More than I ever knew.
Yeah. So, and it's you know, to me, that's one of the most fulfilling things is when you know the light goes on and it's like, wow, now I really understand much better what our challenges are. Megan, you talked about how this the commission is going to be a huge challenge, and you're right, it is. But at the end of the day, the work that we do really does have to have I believe consensus support of the members on the commission, because the policy that we ultimately adopt. And I'm gonna steal a line from Michael Bennett, who I supported during the primary, which is durable. And so the senator from Colorado, durable legislation. This needs to have legs that last through Republican governors, Democratic governors, Republican legislators, Democratic legislators, and continues to be valuable and serve the needs of students and families and taxpayers across the Granite State. So, so that's really important. So, you know, working with my colleagues across the aisle, working with the governor's appointment to the commission, and working with all the members on the commission are really really important to get this done. So it's an aggressive schedule, and that's it was aggressive schedule to begin with in January, to be able to get all of this done and have a report by December. When we got a month and a half knocked out due to the beginning of the pandemic, that put increased time crunch on that. So we are, while our regular commission meetings generally are on Mondays at 2, we have work group meetings that meet. Well, we're going to be meeting all day on Thursday, right? And we met all day. I think it was a week ago on Thursday. So we're literally meeting 6 to 10 hours a week, every week, just about. And while it's tough to do, it's actually made it. It's a little easier to pull together meetings via Zoom than having to drive in and set up conference space at the legislative office building. So, you know, in some respects, the remote meetings have improved our logistics and allowed us to keep running while we're going through this, because I'm sure some of you have been, you're on boards that meet every other week or once a month, and you lose a lot of steam in between those meetings. So we're not losing any steam. We pick up right where we left off, and I found that to be really exciting and brings a lot of energy to the whole effort. See what we've done so far. So I'm not going to go into the whole thing with a lot of detail. I'll show you where you can download it. There's a progress report that came out last week, and Brian, you've probably got a copy of this now, and you were I think you were there for most of all of this anyway, so hopefully it was more sort of historical rehash for you. But the commission's been reviewing volumes of historical documents in New Hampshire considering everything from how adequacy's been proposed going back to the 1984 Augenblick report, to Governor Jeanne Shaheen's 2000 report on revenue options for funding education. Obviously the two Supreme Court rulings, the current Conval lawsuit. We've had presentations from the Attorney General's office, the Department of Ed, the Department of Revenue Administration, just, you know, numerous organizations, as well as a lot of organizations that are internal to public education in New Hampshire. So the special educators, we've had presentations from school business officers, from CTE directors. Brian, you can probably help me out if I'm missing some here, but I'm trying to just sort of give you the general picture that we're really engaging in you know, as broad an understanding of what the challenges you all face and we all face together to put together a funding proposal. So
can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
There was something that came up about separation of church and state and looking at the funding for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Max brought it up. I don't know, Max, do you want to explain a little bit more what you were wondering, and maybe he'll be able to answer it for you?
Sure. I work in Manchester, and we spend quite a bit of money on transportation and other services to not public charter schools necessarily, but parochial and religious-based schools. And when I first started in this profession, you know, it was very clear that there was a separation of church and state. And then at some point, things shifted, and now we're obligated to pay money for these services. And I still think that's wrong. And I wonder if that's going to be looked at as far as the funding base. It's taking away money from public schools. Parents make choices for the kids to go to parochial schools. It shouldn't be on the public taxpayer to supplement that, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on. You're probably aware of the SCOTUS decision that was handed down a couple weeks ago, week and a half ago, something like that. And I've only read just sort of like, you know, brief synopsis of that on the New York Times, but I've chatted with Barrett and Carl and others about, look, let's get a more detailed read on what this all means. So unfortunately, the you know, court decisions on this right now are not going in the direction of separation of church and state, and you know, but I absolutely believe that you know, we need to keep that separate, because we can't be disenfranchising, you know, students who go to who attend our public schools, and you know, we've had bills that at least the 2 years I've been on the House Education Committee that you know, try to introduce you know, new religious services, or teachers being able to hand out religious material and stuff like that. And you know, we've been successful at defeating those initiatives, but that there's going to be constant pressure always on that.
Yeah. Megan, if I can just do a quick follow-up. Thanks. I will say to you that as a person that is not Catholic and not Protestant, I'm always very offended when my money is paying for kids to go someplace that is a parental choice that's not a public school. So, I mean, you know, before I die, I'm going to get this issue out there. I mean, I've asked in Manchester, I think for 5 years in public forums, you know, can the public please see how much money we're paying for transportation, other services? And they all nod, and we've never seen any accounting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that most districts know the public doesn't know what they're really paying for non-public school support.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's it's an issue in all districts. It's a big issue in Manchester because you've got so many um, charter schools and and religious schools that you have to work with. So yeah, and there's been, and I'm sure it's intentional, lack of transparency when it comes to the cost of that's borne by public school districts to provide these. So what I'd like to do, if because I know I don't have that much more time, is just can I do a quick screen share to just show you guys the so this is the commission's website. We actually brought on to help all of the administration and logistics and coordination of this massive amount of work. We've contracted with the Carsey School of Public Policy at UNH. Bruce Mallory is the lead of the effort from Carsey, and they take care of managing our website, archiving all of the data that we're collecting, facilitating public outreach. So we've got a public engagement work group that's chaired by Representative Myler, and I think a number of you I think have probably already responded to some of the surveys that they've sent out. But we're getting strong response on that, and as Mel talks about, it's really the parallel rail of the work that we're doing with adequacy and fiscal policy, but to keep members of the education community, but also of the general public, aware of what we're doing and constantly seek feedback on what we're doing. So that's what's been going on there, and you can find what we're doing by clicking the calendar, and you can see upcoming meetings that that have been scheduled. I think we're scheduled through about mid-August right now, but we probably add about another week every week, and this section right here is actually tremendous. There's, first of all, you can get caught up in the 500 meetings we've had to date, and they're all archived here with so this was yesterday's. Oh no, sorry, this was yesterday's here. That's Thursday's. But with the agenda for the day, the minutes that were approved from the past meeting, these are briefs that were performed. We've got a data contractor that we've hired from the American Institutes on Research, and they're actually they're in the process of downloading all of the DOE 25 data from the department, including the unsuppressed data, so that they can do a full deep dive analysis on education funding and costing in New Hampshire. It's got every district is included. Anyway, these are reports that they've written that are very informative. You can see what's happening in Kansas, New Jersey, and Vermont. They've got other ones as well, and each one of these has sort of similar things. The other area that I think is really a huge resource is this part of the website, which right at the top is our first report. It's our progress report from June 22nd. Everybody's always interested in contracts, how much you're paying UNH, how much you're paying your data contractor, your research contractor, what were all the documents that led up to that. These are the briefs that AIR has put together for us so far, and we've got information on all the court cases, national resources, state level resources, what's happening in Massachusetts, It's really an enormously valuable set of information, and the members of the commission have been using these to really understand where we've been and lay out where we're going. And I guess the final part I'd want to talk about is the role that that you guys can play in this. And obviously, you know, I think it's really helpful when NEA New Hampshire keeps all the teams, you know, appraised of what we're doing at a state level. And when Mel Myler's public engagement work group sends out a survey request to people, you know, if NEA New Hampshire forwards it out to the members, that's really helpful because we're all getting barraged with email, we're all getting barraged with text messages, and it's hard to pick out what's you know, what's important. But this is really important. I think it's the most important stuff we're doing in the state, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Dave. So I'm looking through the comments, and a lot of them, you know, this is really impressive, just the thoroughness that this is going through. And I think, you know, getting more people to come would be interesting to the meetings at 2 o'clock. So I did share that they were on the Mondays. But does anyone have any questions or comments or anything for Representative Luna that they want to bring up that they didn't bring up in the chat? Basically, just unmute yourself, because I'm the same way. I think I'm on 3 pages and I can't see all the screens.
Yeah, and I'm not looking at the participant panel with the hand raised and stuff like that. So anybody just jump in. Or if you've heard enough and you just want to go back to talking about what the governor was talking about earlier, that's okay too.
So, Dave, this is Lisa Frigno, and I'm from Newport. One of the, first of all, thank you, because, you know, we know here in Newport how important this is, and we so appreciate your work. One of the arguments I'm hearing all the time is people are taking our tax, you know, the school tax portion, and dividing it by the number of the students and saying things like, well, you're spending $19,000 per student. And I'm wondering how you respond to that, or what formula is the commission using to determine spending per student? Because honestly, in Newport, we are not spending $19,000 per student. Trust me.
Yeah, you're probably not spending $19,000 in Newport property tax dollars on that, because $19,000 is about the state average per student spend. So maybe all in, you're probably pretty close to that. Most of the districts are pretty well, you know, packed into that center. I mean, nobody's average, but there's a lot of districts that are close, and there are some that are really on the margins, but not too many. But you know, I would point to the fact that New Hampshire has one of the strongest outcomes nationally when it comes to student proficiency, and that's something that every Granite Stater can be proud of, because it's showing that kids from New Hampshire can compete nationally with kids from any other state, and we compete globally, and there's no reason to go backwards on that. You know, I think where people get most frustrated is so much of the funding comes from local property taxpayer dollars, and it's, you know, the line I hear from Newport all the time is Sunapee got the lake and Newport got the taxes. If the glacier had shifted a little bit, you know, 10 miles, then it would have been completely different. So it's just dumb luck. And Sunapee pays way more than, I mean, their per student cost is way more than 19. They're one of the, I mean, they're not Waterville Valley, but they're significantly higher than that. But yeah, and you know, I think the other thing too that you face in Newport and a lot of other districts face it too, is that it's harder to hire staff and retain staff, and we need to make sure that as we're doing adequacy funding, that we're able to consider the specific circumstances that are in different municipalities and different cities and towns and school districts. I mean, you know, you go up to Berlin, and obviously they've got different challenges than what you know, Hollis Brookline has. I'm not saying that Hollis Brookline doesn't have challenges; they have challenges too, but they're just different challenges. And so these are the disparities that you know, that I mentioned when we were talking about the commission's charge, and to be able to cost out what those disparities are in a way that addresses them for each of the districts. But I think, you know, Granite State schools have a lot to be proud of. What we don't have to be proud of is how we've been paying for them, because that's been really unfair.
Thanks, Dave. There's a couple questions that came in. I do want to put this one up though. What about costs? What about statewide cost sharing for special ed at the high end cost wise? Profile is about 240 kids. One Easter seal placement can blow our whole reserve fund. Has there been talk about this at the commission or anything?
So actually, actually I had some discussion about this today with Senator Khan and Representative Myler and Bruce Mallory and the team from AIR, and you know, everybody's familiar with the categorical aid that the state does provide for the highest, most I'm missing. There's a lot of education terms, even 12 years on a school board, I really don't like. And high cost students is not a term that I like, but it's a term that's being used. And so looking at different ways to do that, whether we can put that into the adequacy formula, so that it gets looked at more completely, or if it's done on this sort of pro rata share through what's now special education aid, formerly catastrophic aid, another term that I didn't really like. Yeah, those are the things we're looking at.
So it's being looked at, I think, which is, you know, important to know that at least it's part of the conversation at this point. What's the commission proposing for equitable school funding versus real estate tax dollars?
Versus real estate tax dollars. So we haven't proposed anything yet. So if I was to propose something here, it would just be where Dave Luno is on you know, on July 14th. So and like I said, I've come a long way in the first 5 months of this journey in terms of my thinking. But I think in general, what we're looking at as far as you know, if we were to look at sort of like tenets behind this, looking at every district's funded for an adequate education for students for an opportunity for an adequate education with comparable outcomes, whether you're in Berlin or Newport or Hollis Brookline. And number two, that it be done with an equitable tax structure, so that you don't have people in Claremont paying 8 times more than, you know, people in you know, Newcastle or Waterville Valley. And then and I had a third on this. Oh yeah, the third. And this was a new term for me, but horizontal tax equity. That's a little different than the vertical tax equity. So I love the terms because I'm a tech guy. But vertical tax equity is making sure that taxes in Berlin are fair compared to the taxes, you know, proportional and reasonable compared to the taxes in Newcastle. But that doesn't necessarily make it fair for everybody in Berlin or fair for everybody in Wolfboro, because there may be somebody that lives 3 miles off the lake that you know, living on a fixed income, retired couple, $150,000 home, something like that, that just can't afford the type of taxes that we're paying in Claremont or Newport or Berlin or Hopkinton or anything like that. And so having a property tax relief program that is really well thought out and that is really well funded appropriately to meet the need. Right now, we do have a low and middle income property tax relief program that basically nobody qualifies for. I mean, I don't even remember what the latest year, I think it's funded with $13 million or even less than that. And I think you have to be making like well under the poverty level and living in a house that costs no more than $100,000. I mean, you know, in today's world, that there's not too many people that qualify for that. So I think that would be the third type of thing we're looking at.
So there's a couple. One is more of a comment, I think, and if there's more of a question with this, I think it was from Lauren Katz. Definitely jump in. But basically, just the importance of school funding, because if we're not getting the money we need from the state, that has to be made up by the local. When that can't happen, we lose, teaching positions, para positions, ESP positions, everything. So that's definitely, the concern for us, especially after if we lose a lot of educators during this COVID crisis, what's going to happen after? Are we going to be able to hire them back, et cetera? There's a couple questions and comments on here about income tax. And is the commission looking at anything for an income tax, for one? And what is the commission doing, if anything, talking about tax caps in cities that have tax caps?
Yeah, so those really good questions there. Cities can impose tax caps, so we can't necessarily prevent that from happening, but the tax cap only applies to the local school tax, not a statewide. Like currently we have the swept that I forget what the DRA set it at, a $1.80 equalized, something like that, or I mean it's around the $2. And depending upon where your city or town is on the equalized value, it can be a little bit less than that, a little bit more than that. But the I'm forgetting the other
the tax cap, and then there's just been a lot of questions about
on income tax. So everything's on the table. We're going to consider everything, and this has been this will be one of the challenges, because I think if we were a legislative study committee, we'd be hamstrung by, the prospective policies. But this is an independent commission. I think this deserves to look at all revenue possibilities, and including income tax, including sales tax, including other value-added taxes, including tax on individual capital gains, which Representative Ames and I have promoted the last 6 years, I think. But there's only, and of course, statewide property tax. And the thing I like to say to John Tobin and others, and I actually I should say I think I first said it to John Tobin, but we're already paying for public education. Right. We're already raising total public education costs $3.2 billion, a little short of 200 million comes from Fed. So let's say 3 billion is from the state. 700 of that is actually from non-property tax dollars. So business property tax, business enterprise tax, rooms and meals, stuff like that. So that leaves about 2.3 billion in property taxes. It's already being raised. It's already being raised. We're already coming up with the money. We're just coming up with it at a rate of $50 per thousand up in Berlin. Again, I'm exaggerating the amounts a little bit, but I'm pretty close.
Yeah.
50 per thousand in Berlin and 5 per thousand in Newcastle. So, so the $2 million home in Newcastle pays the same in real dollars as the $200,000 home in Berlin. I mean, wrap your heads around that in terms of fairness. And so all of these things are on the table, and they have to be. And there's only a couple of sources that can even be big enough to move the needle. Individual capital gains is a $100 million revenue source. That doesn't move the needle very far.
It's such a big task. I mean, obviously, looking at everything you're doing and trying to come up with a solution that's going to work long term for New Hampshire. You know, I think one of the struggles that a lot of educators have, or I know I've been part of, is living in the town where your taxes are going to go up, but knowing that it's your contract. You know, knowing that your contract might push them up, knowing that you need it, but you know, what are you going to do? Earlier in the thread, there was, you know, the people that are on this commission that you mentioned. I think this is probably the most progress I've seen, just in the fact that it's not the same people looking at it over and over again, right? The definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and trying to get different results. Listening to the debate last year about this group, that we shouldn't have an outside group come in, is just ridiculous. So just the fact that it passed, you're on the, you know, on a track to find out something to do and really look at what could work for New Hampshire, I think is amazing. I think I covered most of what was in the chat box in terms of kind of bigger questions, but are there any other questions? I mean, we have Representative Luna with us here, and this is the perfect time. If any questions weren't answered, you know that if you send them to me, I'll send them right over and we'll get the answers for you. But this is not an easy thing to do by any means. I know I want to thank you from NEA New Hampshire that you're looking at this, because it is the future. You know, I think that's what we've been saying all along, is, you know, that the education of children is the future of New Hampshire. And if we don't fund it right, it's not going to be right. You know, we need to be funding it properly. I don't think anyone thinks that we're going to have, you know, complete funding. I think, like you said, everything's on the table at this point. I think we do need to look at everything to make sure that we're doing the best that we can for the kids in New Hampshire, because it is an investment. So that's what we're looking at. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. You had, you know, up at one point we were at like 60 some odd members just listening to you, and that's good for a Tuesday night. I'm pretty excited. You know, when we talk about education funding, it's not always woo, let's talk about the funding, you know, one of those kind of shiny ball topics, but it is so critical and so crucial to obviously our jobs, but just to our future. So definitely when we get a little closer to maybe coming out with some recommendations, I'd love to have you back on. We're going to continue these Tuttle Talks throughout the school year, just to see what's going on and if there's anything that we can do to help, especially since it's our livelihood. I think a lot of people would be interested in that.
Well, it's your livelihood, but it's all of our livelihood.
Exactly,
so,
exactly.
You know, anybody that thinks they're not vested in their local public school system, I don't know what they're thinking. So.
Well, and that's the crazy thing, you know, that I always, I never understood it. I mean, this is our future. It affects everybody, whether you're in the school system right now or not. But yes, I do thank you so much for coming on and spending an hour with us tonight.
You're very welcome.
We are going to, tomorrow night, have I think, pretty filled night. We might have some more information, seeing what the governor is saying, not saying, should versus shall. We know that in our own contracts, that is such an important distinction between should and shall, right? Mandate or not. There's definitely a place for it, and I think there's definitely a few more places that should have been put into the guidance from today. But I have a couple talks for tomorrow.
So one thing to add to that, Mel and Jay and I have set up a joint meeting of the House and Senate Education Committees for Tuesday, July 21st. It's a Zoom meeting, 9 o'clock in the morning, goes till about noon. And the 9 o'clock, it's basically going to be to meet with the commissioner about school reopening task force recommendations and follow-up. So a lot from we'll have to, I haven't even seen what did you say it was, 20, 40 pages, the report?
56.
56 pages. I haven't read, I read the 2-page from the other day.
Yeah, no, this is 56.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can
So,
send it to you.
That's, I can get, I know where to find it. But so it'll be the commissioner, we've got a superintendent's panel, we've got,
Me,
yeah, are you on the,
I am.
the educator guidance panel?
I am.
And then we've got access issues, and then policy and regulations. There's a lot missing for it. I'm sure we're going to have another one. Tamara Lay already pointed out, what about special education? And obviously, what about operations and maintenance? What about physical plant? What about airflow? These are all things that need to be reviewed. So I think this is the first of.
And we can get that invitation out once we get the links for it. We can get it out to our members if they want to listen in on it.
That'd be great.
Yeah, the commission will be very excited to hear from me, I'm sure.
Looking forward to it. So, all right, I'm gonna jump off and let you guys get back to all your secret stuff.
Great, thank you, Dave.
And thank you all very, very much. And be safe. Enjoy the summer.